Greetings. The pen for today is the Jinhao 992. This is the extra fine nib variant of the 992. So it has a hooded extra fine nib. For those of you who are familiar with the 992, most of the time you see it in a form that looks like this, where it has a fine number 5 style conventional shaped unhooded Jinhao nib. This one is, like I said, a little different. This is the extra fine variant, and it has a hooded extra fine nib. It's a light plastic pen, only weighs 17 grams. It is fairly conventionally shaped. It's fairly conventionally sized. So if you compare it to a Pilot Metropolitan and a Lamy Safari, it is pretty much spot on the same size as these, but like I said, light pen, only weighs 17 grams. It's all plastic, tiny bits of metal on the clip. Very, very inexpensive pen, $2 pen. You can kind of think of this as a substitute for a lot of disposable pens, etc. Although it's not a disposable pen, it is a cartridge converter filled pen. Theoretically, this can be eyedroppered. It does have a plastic plug in the back, so there's all sorts of people online who've removed the plug, glued it back in, sealed it, etc., and then gotten this pen to be able to be eyedroppered. Personally, I just don't think it's worth the hassle. I'm just fine filling it with the cartridge converter, but more power to you if you want to try it. Like I said, decent clip, gets the job done. Plain plastic finial on either end. Like I said, on this end it does have this sort of plug that's sort of stuck in there. It's stuck in there fairly well. What I have heard is it's stuck, you don't get too much cracking here on the solid color pens. What tends to happen is on the transparent variants, as you can see here, there actually is a crack. So apparently the transparent plastic does develop cracks, and the colored plastics, of which it comes in many, many colors, tend not to have that problem. Again, that's just what most people tend to say. The cap band says Jinhao along the cap band. It takes 1 and a change turns to open, so it opens fairly easily, and it posts well, posts securely, has a very nice size section, and it's got this nice sized lip at the end of the section for gripping and making sure that your finger doesn't sort of get onto the nib. And like I said, this is a stiff hooded nib. You're not going to get flex in this, etc. Now, let's talk about pens that are suited for a purpose. I use this pen every single day pretty much, and I use it for one particular purpose. I do crossword puzzles on the subway on my way to work and back. So a couple things for a pen you're going to use for that. Number one, you don't want to use an expensive pen, because if it's on the subway, it can get dropped, it can get lost, it can break, etc. So you want to use a cheap pen that you don't worry about losing or breaking. Number two, a hooded nib is somewhat important, because think about it, when you're doing crossword puzzles, you're mostly sitting there not writing and thinking about what to write. So a hooded nib is very good because it's not going to dry out nearly as much. That's the whole point of the hooded nib. And you also want something that's sort of on the fine side, because crossword puzzles come in different sort of sizes. Some grids are actually very, very small, etc. Sometimes you want to make little notes to yourself, etc. So you want something that writes fairly fine, something that could even write even finer in reverse. This pen covers all those bases. So it's really, when you talk about pens suited for a particular purpose, this is really it. Again, cheap pen. I hesitate to say cheap. It's an inexpensive pen. It really does exactly what you would want it to do. In my case, for what I'm using it for. It's also, I think, a fairly good introductory pen if you want a very, very, very low cost way of introducing a friend to fountain pens, either this particular variant of the 992 or the conventional one with the more traditional style nib, would be a really good a good choice. So, and you know, if you want to just give somebody a pen, ink it up for them, and get them started on the fountain pen journey, not a bad idea at all. So, that about covers everything to say about the 992 pen itself. Now, let's see how it writes. Okay, what we're writing with here is the Jinhao number 992, and this is a extra fine nib, and this is a stiff nib, so you are not going to get flex at all. That would be a big no, but that's not what this is for. So it writes well. It's I would say average wetness for a nib this fine. You can reverse write with it, and it goes a bit finer. So then you're really now talking about a extra fine when you reverse write with it. And it's a nice, reliably flowing pen. That's great for the $2 or so that it costs. I mean, no complaints there. It fits well in the hand. It posts nice and solidly. You can use it unposted if you like. It's got a good length to it. The section is comfortable. The threads are not too obtrusive. It really gets the job done and does it well. So there's not a lot much more to say about the Jinhao 992. It's not a major investment. I would seriously recommend trying it out. Like I said, it's a fantastic pen for introducing maybe a friend to fountain pens who's not been exposed to them before. Great idea. Or you can use it for what I use it for if you want to do crossword puzzles on the subway. So now let's talk about this ink. So speaking of doing crossword puzzles on the subway, and speaking of being fit for purpose. So I said how this pen is really ideal for the purpose that I use it for. This ink is even more ideal. So this ink here is Noodler's X Feather. And the point of this ink is that it doesn't feather, hence the X in X Feather. So it's not the fastest drying ink in the world on regular paper like this rhodia paper. So as you can see, there is a little bit of smearing on the stuff I just wrote, and on the stuff I wrote a minute or so ago, it still smears a little bit as well. So on sort of very smooth rhodia paper like this, it does smear a bit. So it is not the fastest drying ink in the world. But frankly, that's not what it's meant for. Oh, one other thing I should add, it is extremely black. So there are people who think, and opinions can vary, and I do have a video where I compare all the black inks I own, so if you want further details, I recommend you check that video out. But there are people who will say that they feel this is literally the blackest ink there is out there. I'm not prepared to quite go that far, but it is a very black ink. So if that's a major criteria for you, by all means, this is a good ink to look at, but you do need to be aware of it. Depending on if you use it on nice paper like this rhodia paper, you may have a problem. But that's not what this ink is meant for. This ink is meant to write on extraordinarily cheap paper without featherings. So, like I said, if you're doing a crossword, you really want it to not feather, because this is printed on extremely cheap paper, which very often will feather with a lot of other inks. So you could try using a ballpoint, you could try using a pencil, but if you really want to use a fountain pen on a crossword puzzle, this is really a perfect ink. So this is a really good pairing of ink and pen for the particular purpose that we're using it here for. So let's show you how that works a little bit. So let's see, 88 down, director Federico. I'm going to guess that's Fellini. Let's see, F-E-L-L-I-N-I. Yeah, that fits, so we'll put that in there, F-E-L-L-I-N-I. So as you can see, it's nice, black, and contrasty, and does not feather even on this extremely cheap newsprint. So if you're doing it on newsprint or using cheap copy paper or anything like that, this Noodler's X Feather ink is really going to really going to get the job done for you. So this is really a good example of a pen and ink, and a pen and ink combination that is really appropriate for a particular use case that I have. And frankly, like I said, this is the only pen that I use 5 days a week. I rotate through all the pens in my collection on a pretty much daily basis. But if you want to know which pen do I probably use the most in terms of the most number of days that I use it, this pen gets used twice a day, Monday through Friday, as I'm taking the subway to and from work. So this is actually, even though it's only a $2 pen, probably the most used pen that I have. Again, good pen, good ink, and of course, like all Noodler's inks, it comes in this very economical 3-ounce bottle. So that's nearly 90 milliliters of ink for a very reasonable price. Again, not an expensive ink, but one that really gets the job done and really fit for purpose, as they say. So I think that will do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please give them to me. I'd love to hear them. And by all means, please subscribe. And until next time, bye-bye.